National Night Out. Good evening. Welcome to the workshop meeting for July 28, 2004. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Trustee Vogel.
Present.
Trustee Hein.
Present.
Trustee Brady.
Here.
Trustee Heer.
Present.
Trustee Kruger.
Present.
Trustee Lang.
Here.
President Argyros.
Here. Citizens' concerns and comments?
There are none,
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Staff reports. Mr. Planner, Andrew Jennings, you got a report for us?
Yes, thanks. The staff has been working with the management company Rosen over at Harmony Village and Waste Management and the paving contractors. The garbage pickup that was originally scheduled for this Friday is going to be postponed until Tuesday to allow the street adequate time to cure, avoid some damage to the asphalt. So residents there have been receiving emails and flyers about this. The garbage we picked up, recycling we picked up as well on Tuesday instead.
Okay. How's that project going? Are they on time or?
Well, I believe they're wrapping up now.
Are they? Good. Okay. We have a presentation this evening, the report on the financial results for fiscal year 2013. Director Monishing. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I've done in the past, tonight I'd like to talk about the results of the prior fiscal year. Several weeks ago, you received a copy of the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, and last week you heard from Brian Lefevre, who's our auditor, and he talked to you about the audit process. But tonight I just want to give you a summary version of what's in the CAFR and how we did last year, and answer any questions you have.
Thank you.
So this will be brief, but focusing on the general fund, as you'll recall, we budgeted a deficit last year of about $400,000. And the result was actually much better than that. We ended up with a surplus of $571,000. And as you'll see by the top line here, most of that happened on the revenue side. On the expenditure side, we were within 0.29% of what we budgeted. So a very good result for the village this past year. And I want to focus on general fund revenues to explain why we ended up $1,065,000 better than we anticipated. And as I've talked about in the past, our three major sources of revenue are sales tax, income tax, and property tax. And as you'll see from the top line, most of the positive variance came from sales tax. Our sales tax revenue was 7.5% higher than what we budgeted. So that's a good sign for us. It's a sign that the economy in Wheeling is improving as it is elsewhere in the United States, and that's a positive. Income tax as well was up 3.6% higher than what we anticipated for another $124,000. Property tax was right about what we had budgeted. And then all of the other sources of revenue to the general fund, which includes things like food and beverage tax and telecommunications tax and ambulance fees and so forth, was up 3.07% over the budget. So again, a total variance of 3.32% on the positive side. And focusing for just a minute on sales tax, as you can see by this slide, again, we brought in $9.43 million in 2013, a significant increase over 2012. And as I've pointed out to the board in the past, that number, though, is still less than what we brought in 2006 and 2007 prior to the downturn in the economy. So we're still trying very hard to get back to the levels of several years ago. I have a note up here, and you'll see that receipts for the first 4 months of 2014 are up 6.56%. So that trend from last year is continuing this year, and that's a very positive thing for the village. But even at that result, we would end 2014 with a little over $10 million in sales tax and still be trailing what we received back in 2006 and 2007. So it's been a long climb back to where we were. And the same story can be said for income tax. Last year we finished with $3,590,000 in receipts. And this year, through the first 6 months of 2014, we're flat. So it looks like we're going to end the year at about the same place. Now again, looking back to 2008, we're still lower, or we will be lower than we were back then. So that's certainly a positive trend, but not where we want to be.
Michael, explain the income tax, where that money's come from.
The income taxes, as you know, you pay personal income tax to the state of Illinois. Corporations pay corporate income tax to the state of Illinois. And then the village receives a share of that based on its population. So it really has nothing to do with the income that's generated in Wheeling. It's just distributed on a per capita basis to every community. So every community gets the same amount on a per capita basis, but of course it varies based on what your population is.
And who controls that? The state legislature down there in Springfield?
State legislature, and that source of revenue has been under attack for many years. There's been a lot of speculation over the years that they would cut the municipal share of income tax, and that's a battle we've been fighting for a long time and continue to fight.
Especially the last couple of years.
Yep.
Michael, if I might?
Yeah.
Between 2004 and 2008, there's a significant rise. What would cause something like that per year?
Our census.
Well, we did do a special census in 2006, I believe it was. 2006 or 2007, and that caused a significant increase.
More people, more money.
Right.
Okay.
And I just wanted to highlight something here, which is a little bit off the subject of the results of last year, but I think it's worth noting. And that is, if you look at this top table, and you look at the sales and income tax back in 2007, we brought in $14 million, a little over $14 million in revenue. In 2014, as I pointed out, we're projecting about 13.6, which should still be $415,000 less than what we brought in 7 years ago. If you look at this table here, what this shows is I just simply took the numbers from 2007 and I projected out where we would be if we had simply gotten 2% increases in sales and income tax every year since '07. And the difference between what we actually expect to receive in 2014 and what we would have received had we just received very minimal increases over the years is $2.5 million. And that's significant because, as you know, for the last few years we've been dealing with deficit budgets. And had the economy just continued at a normal rate, or even less than a normal rate, we wouldn't be talking about deficits. We'd be fully funding our SURF fund, we'd have money for capital projects, and we'd be running surpluses. So when people ask, why is it that you increase the property tax levy? Well, it's because you have to make up for these losses, and that's in effect what they are that have occurred over the last several years. As you can see, our property tax levy has increased pretty regularly over the years. The average tax levy increase since 2004 has been just over 4%. This year, the total levy will be $11,550,000. And then this just simply shows all other revenue sources by fiscal year. This year is pretty similar to last year, but you can see that that's fluctuated over the years. Now I want to switch from revenues to expenditures, and I've shown you this table in the past, but I think it's got some very important information. And as I've said, in an ideal world, every year we would know exactly how much we're going to spend and exactly how much revenue we're going to bring in. And the reason that that's ideal is because it leads to really very good policy-making decisions. Because if I know what I'm going to spend, I know exactly how much revenue I need. Or I know where I need to cut expenditures to match the revenue that we're bringing in. So for this past year, as I mentioned before, we were right a little bit over budget, $94,000, but right near what we budgeted, and that was true the year before. As you can see, for the 3 prior years, we were significantly under budget, and before that, we were usually right around 100%. So 100% is really the goal, because that makes for good policy decisions. And then if you break down our expenditures from last year to major categories, you can see where the significant variances are. And I just really want to highlight one of them, and that is on overtime. We spent $293,000 more in the overtime category than we budgeted. The other categories, salaries, health insurance, pensions, and so forth, pretty much were a wash. And again, we were right at budget for the year. So that was a very good year from a budgeting standpoint. And then again, as I've talked about in the past, we ended up with a small surplus of $570,000, but we need to keep in mind that that surplus was obtained through a transfer from the Capital Projects Fund of $860,000, by not essentially funding the Capital Equipment Replacement Fund contribution for the year and not fully funding the Liability Insurance Fund. So had we been able to do all 3 of those things, we would have actually ended up with a deficit of $1.7 million. And I simply highlight that because our goal has always been to have a fully funded SURF fund and Capital Projects Fund, as well as liability insurance, without having to balance the general fund by borrowing from those funds. Now, recently the Village Board approved a Capital Projects Fund policy that says that we will use no more than 25% of Capital Projects Fund money for debt service purposes. So for 2014 and beyond, that means that there will be more money allocated for capital projects, which I think is a very important move that the board made. Here's our fund balance history for the last few years. You'll see that, of course, during the worst part of the downturn in the economy, we were running significant deficits. The last few years have been much better, so it's definitely a positive trend. At the end of 2013, we finished the year with a fund balance in the general fund of $14.5 million, which is 44.5% of annual operating expenditures. Well in excess of our 25% policy. The next few slides show our projections for the next few years, and the general fund continues to be a concern. At the end of 2011, we had a fund balance that was equal to 52% of operating expenditures. The trend, however, is for that to decline the next few years. And this is based on an assumption that we're going to make a full contribution every year to the SURF fund. That we will have 4% increases in sales and income tax and 5% property tax levy increases. But our expenditures continue to outpace our revenues, and that's something that we have to be aware of and be concerned about as we head into the budget process for 2015. The Water and Sewer Fund, on the other hand, is very healthy. We finished 2013 with a significant fund balance. We fund water and sewer related capital projects out of this fund, so that's why the fund balance fluctuates significantly from year to year. But we're in a good position to maintain our 25% fund balance policy, and these projections out to 2019 assume a 2.5% rate increase each year. If the results continue the way they appear to continue, we may even be able to lower that, though. The 911 fund finished 2013 with a fund balance at nearly 50%, which is well above the 15% policy that we have. that's a positive result. It means that we're not spending as much as we anticipated in that fund. And in the subsequent years, we can cut back on the general fund's contribution to the 911 fund. In addition, as a result of the recent agreement that we reached with Des Plaines for dispatching, the revenue that's going to be generated from that program will help offset the money that's been transferred over the past few years from the general fund to the 911 fund, in essence making the 911 fund whole. So that's a very good development. The liability insurance fund finished the year with $1,539,000 in fund balance. That represents 167% of our annual claim expense. And the fund balance policy here is based on our annual claim expense. It's how much we anticipate having to pay out in workers' compensation and liability insurance claims. And our policy is we'd like to have a balance of twice what our annual claim expense should be. We've cut back on our contributions to the liability insurance fund for the last few years, and that's why we're not quite there, but we're not in bad shape either. We've had a couple of very good claim years the last 2 years, which I wanted to show you with this particular slide. As you can see, liability claim experience fluctuates significantly from year to year. Back in 2004, we had a pretty good year at a little less than $500,000, but you can see how volatile that can be. It can go from that to $1.8 million the following year. Our average claim losses are $742,000 per year. But if you look at the last few years, 3 of the 4 years have been significantly under that. So I think that the efforts of the departments to stress safety and some of the things that we've done in terms of joining a pool with 3 other communities for claims administration and safety purposes is paying off and will pay off in the future.
Michael, can I add to that? Mm-hmm. I'd just like to point out that, as Michael said, this number fluctuates, but just so that the board is aware, our actual annual total accidents by number of incidents is trending down, as Michael just said, because of the initiatives that the department heads have taken to promote safety and a safe work environment. But the spikes that you see are related to, for the most part, individual single incidents. So this is not just we had a bad year in 2005 where there were 30 additional accidents. That's attributable to a single incident. And that is usually the case when you see a spike, that it is a single incident that is causing that spike.
That's right. Okay, now moving on to the Capital Projects Fund. We finished 2013 with a fund balance of $1.7 million. As you can see, in the next few years, we're budgeting to really not have a fund balance in essence. And there is no fund balance policy for the Capital Projects Fund. That's because the purpose of the fund is to spend the money on infrastructure projects. And therefore, there's no real need for a fund balance. You'll see that I've highlighted some of the projects that we have budgeted for the next 5 years, and you can see that we've budgeted $5.4 million in street projects, $1.7 million in sidewalks for both new sidewalks and replacement of existing sidewalks, $600,000 in street light replacement, and then there's a couple of other categories here, miscellaneous projects, that total $11.2 million in capital expenditures. What's exciting about that is that that will all be funded without issuing any debt. And that's because we have a gas and electric utility tax, or use tax, I should say, that pays for those infrastructure projects, so we don't need to borrow money to do that. Now I want to talk briefly about the TIF funds. The Crossroads TIF, as you know, expires in 2019. And last year we finished with a fund balance, a negative fund balance of $1.9 million. That was because the Crossroads TIF essentially lent money to the old town center TIF in order to cover a deficit that would have existed at the end of 2013 had we not made that transfer. The board recently transferred some money from the South Milwaukee TIF to the Crossroads TIF to make it whole, so that deficit will essentially be wiped out in the next year or two. And in the future, until the TIF expires, there'll be some smaller fund balances, but money available for any infrastructure or economic development projects that occur in that TIF district in the next few years. The Lake Cook Milwaukee TIF finished with a fund balance last year of $2.5 million. We expect that to grow significantly over the next few years. It expires in 2026. The funds that are available in the next few years will be used for infrastructure projects or other economic development-related projects. Staff is working right now on a list of infrastructure projects for the board to consider for the use of that money, and the money can always be used in another TIF district as well for a redevelopment agreement or land acquisition, other TIF-eligible type costs. The reason the fund balance begins to grow in later years is because some of the TIF incentives that we've been paying for in that TIF district will be completed in the next year or two.
I got a question.
Sure.
The revenue bond to do the West End of $24
Yes.
million, where we stand on that right now? The revenue from the West End is paying for it?
Yes.
Ballpark
Yes.
balance on that is?
The balance is about $18 million. We issued in 2005, 2006, we issued a $19 million TIF revenue bond. Most of what we've been paying to this point has been interest. So we've just now started to pay down on the principal, so we're down to about 18 million or so. And we'll continue paying that until the TIF expires. But that's money, as you pointed out, that's generated by the project. It's not general fund money. It's not property taxes from the tax levy or anything like that.
Okay, thanks.
The South Milwaukee TIF, we finished the year with a fund balance of $7.8 million. We transferred some money out already this year to other funds and declared a $2.5 million surplus that we distributed to the other taxing districts recently. And that's why in 2014 the fund balance is going to drop significantly to just over $1 million. As a result of the intergovernmental agreement that the board reached recently with the other taxing districts, in future years we're going to be declaring a surplus equal to 45% of the annual increment. But there will be money nonetheless in this TIF district that can be used in the new Southeast TIF or in one of the other TIF districts for other projects. Then I just want to talk briefly about the Capital Equipment Replacement Fund. As you know, this fund was set up to eventually replace our capital equipment, which is our vehicles and our technology and so forth. We have 190 or so different items that are funded through the SURF fund, and they're valued at approximately $11.7 million. The purpose of the fund, obviously, is to reduce the long-term costs of replacing this equipment and to avoid the need to borrow for that and pay interest. And one of the advantages of the fund is that it eliminates large swings in the budget from year to year. And we just recently had a really great example of that, and that is when the board approved the purchase of 2 new fire trucks, essentially. $1.2 million is going to come out of that fund this year and next to pay for the replacement of those vehicles. And that's money that we would have either had to bond for or finance in some other way had we not had a SURF fund. So on the other hand, as a result of that expenditure, the fund balance for the general fund portion of the SURF fund will drop to $3.5 million at the end of 2014, and that represents about 38% of the value of the general fund assets in the SURF fund. So the fund is a very important part of what we do here from a financial standpoint. And then that's really all I have to say about 2013, but I wanted to leave you with where we're at so far in 2014. And Trustee Kruger had asked me to do this on a quarterly basis, so I'm trying to kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. But as you'll see, for this year, we budgeted a deficit in the general fund of $1,055,000. And as we sit here today, it appears that we're going to finish a little bit worse than that at about $1.5 million. Now, it's early in the year. We only have 4 months of sales tax revenue. So things can change significantly. But these are my best projections as of this point. I think we're going to be a little bit better than what we anticipated in terms of revenues. And our expenditures are going to be a little bit higher. Most of that, the revenue and expenditure variance, however, has to do with the agreement that we reached with Des Plaines for dispatching. So we're going to bring in some additional revenue and spend a little bit more money this year than what we budgeted. But the real explanation for the variance it boils down to 5 points, and I'll just go through those very briefly. Our sales tax numbers this year are, again, higher than we anticipated, about 1.5%, and that means that we believe we're going to finish with about $147,000 more than we budgeted. That's going to be offset, however, by almost dollar for dollar by income tax, which is basically flat this year and will be about 3.9% lower than anticipated, as we anticipate at this point. Telecom tax is going to be about $235,000 lower than anticipated. Most of that has to do with the fact that we just found out from the state of Illinois that a large telecommunications provider had been taxing its customers incorrectly, and as a result of a class action lawsuit now has to recover that money from the state of Illinois, which of course the state of Illinois then will recover from the municipalities that received the money. So we're going to get hit with basically money, a credit. We're going to have to refund some of the money that we've received in the past, and that's why telecom tax is going to be down. And then overtime is going to be, at this point, we think about $260,000 or 26% higher than budgeted, and that has nothing more to do than with the winter that we had and all of the costs that were associated with the overtime related to snow removal and so forth. And then finally, as you know, you recently approved an additional expenditure of $100,000 more than what was budgeted for the EAB program. And that's going to cause our expenditures to be a little bit higher than what we thought. And then finally, my last slide, again, if that comes to pass and we have a $1.5 million deficit this year, we will end the year with a fund balance of a little bit more than $13 million, or 36.6% of operating expenditures. The other concern, of course, is that with a deficit at that point, that becomes our starting point for the budget for 2015, and that's going to obviously present some challenges as we talk about the budget for next year. So with that, I will answer any questions you may have.
Trustee Brady, anything?
I thought last year we talked about the reserve fund, we had, somebody mentioned something about $8 million. Was that true? Now you say we only had four?
Ken, talking to the mic.
Sorry about that. Last year, when we were talking about holding back on the surf fund for a year, we were talking at that time, I think we had $8 million. What happened to all of that?
Well, what we have is essentially $9 million overall, which includes not only the general fund, but also the water and sewer fund assets and the 911 fund assets. So when you look at just the general fund portion, which is what I was trying to highlight and is certainly the majority of it, going into last year, we had $5 million in general fund assets. We just spent, or we're going to spend this year as a result of these fire apparatus purchases and some other purchases, about $1.5 million. So that's going to take us down to about $3.5 million of general fund assets. There's other money for those two other funds.
There's other money elsewhere for the surf fund.
Yeah. And when we talk about the surf fund every year and, how much we're going to fund, What we're really talking about is how much are we going to fund for the general fund portion of it? Because over the years, we've continued to make the full contribution for water and sewer fund-related assets and 911 fund assets, because we don't have deficits in those funds that we need to worry about. So when we cut back, I guess what I'm trying to say is when we've cut back on the contribution to the SURF fund, it's impacted the general fund related assets, police, fire, public works vehicles, that kind of thing, more so than any
In other
other
words,
fund.
SURF covers anything and everything that we have to buy.
Just about. I mean, anything that, did you want to correct me?
Not correct you, but I'm sure you're going to say what I was about to say. So
Well, we have a SURF fund policy. It's major, equipment, fleet, major equipment in excess of $10,000 that's of a non-infrastructure related. So most of what you would think as our major equipment is included in the SURF
So
fund.
when we have a major job like a new well head or something like that costs $20,000, $30,000, that comes out of SURF?
That would not come out of SURF. That would come out of
The
one of the
water funds,
capital
yeah.
funds.
All right, thanks.
Trustee Kruger?
I have nothing except nice work. Thanks.
Trustee Hare?
Nothing, thank you, Michael.
Trustee Hein?
Thank you for a good presentation.
Thank you.
Good budget.
Thanks.
Trustee Vogel?
Just one quick question. The 200% on the insurance, is that village policy or is that the standard?
It's village policy, and so the village board could decide that they only want to fund that to 150% or 100%. In reality, if, let's say the fund balance policy was 100%, if we had one of those bad years that I showed, where it's twice that, and we didn't have the fund balance, we'd have to make up for it out of the general fund. And so the 200% it was intended to avoid having to dip into the general fund to pay for those claim expenses.
Okay. Thank you. Good job, Michael.
Thanks.
Trustee Lang?
Yeah, thanks for the update. No questions.
Just a couple things. Great job as usual, Michael.
Thanks.
But you see the trend here, and that's one of the things that concerns me when we sit down in October and try to do the 2015 budget. As you see, the numbers had increased, and the thought of income tax being jeopardized with them taking, like they're talking about for the last couple of years, and seriously in the last year or two, the price of course services isn't cheap. And that's why, people say development. Well, development brings in new dollars. And I'm telling you right now, we need to be proactive with that. Bring in the retail that's generating new sales tax dollar, new user tax dollars, and putting people's butts in beds that bring people into this community to spend money in this community. It is so important. Otherwise, you'd be looking at tax levies of 15% annually just to break even or hope to break even. Because the cost of personnel is going to be a new number that we saw in 2014 for 2015. You know it, I know it, it's there. So the expenditures I look at every year as being $1 million just keeping the status quo around here.
I think you're absolutely right. And in addition to sales tax and property tax revenue, we also get building permit fees.
Sure.
When, an urban R2, a Wix development, or a Riva development is built. And next year, we're going to get several $100,000 in building permit revenue as a result of those projects. And that's certainly going to help our bottom line, too.
And that's why it's so important to promote this community, to support the economic development team here, to go out there and create those jobs, get those buildings that are empty in the industrial park back on the tax rolls again, and bring people into this community to spend money. It's so important, and that's, number one, a priority. Otherwise, we're going to be looking at 2010 again with massive layoffs, because what are you going to do? We have to stay focused on this, and that's got to be really the guts of it all. And otherwise, the state's wishy-washy. It's scary what they're doing. They're always trying to dip into the municipality, the local level. But we need to stay focused and bring good quality development in here and new people here. And some of the developments that we've had here have brought those new people here that are spending money, which is a positive. And that's why I think you're seeing that 4+% increase in sales tax, because there are new folks here. There are some new businesses here that are generating those dollars. So again, good job with your staff, and Can't wait till October.
I know you always look forward to it.
I know. Thanks.
Thank you.
Item 8, presentation by Village Manager John Svandillis regarding dog parks.
Thank you. Certainly some sobering news to follow after, well, sobering news that we now follow with some positive items, and it's always difficult, and I think the challenge for staff and for the board to continue to provide essential services or new services and balance that against what our revenue stream is on an annual basis. And tonight's discussion starts with dog parks, and I think staff will be able to answer any questions that the board has on these, at least as a general category. But I'd actually like to start with a solution as part of the introduction. After discussing this topic with President Argyris and looking at the data of what it takes to build and maintain a dog park, we thought that perhaps what might be a good idea, recognizing that you, village officials, have heard from the community that there is a need for a dog park, that what might be the best way to fulfill the requests of the citizens that you've heard from, and at the same time balance the expenses that come with such an initiative as a dog park. That what might be the best idea is to, and this will be the question for consensus as we move forward through the discussion, is author a letter of support from the village board to the Park District, recognizing that the Park District really has the authority and the expertise and the understanding in order to do this in a manner that makes the most sense. This is not a small endeavor, and certainly it is within their wheelhouse. And perhaps what we can do is partner with them. And in a letter of support to them, if the board agrees, we could say that as they move forward investigating the idea of a dog park, where it could be, and all the details that are involved in that kind of project, that we could say, listen, we have some land available for you that the village owns already. Perhaps one of those sites makes sense as you do your study through the village of where this dog park should be located. Perhaps we could partner through donating some land to you, and maybe there could be some seed money provided by the village and a small contribution on an annual basis for maintenance of a dog park, because the goal is to get something for the residents to be able to use and to beautify our community. But at this point, that seems to be the best way to do it. As staff investigated this, the realities of bringing this to fruition by our own individual efforts seems to be quite a challenge, and again, this really is their expertise. So the thought, and I guess the request, or at least the recommendation from me, is that we proceed in that manner as a partner should the Park District decide to move forward in the future. That said, I think we can answer any questions that the board may have if you'd like specific details as far as what it entails or any other questions that you'd like to discuss at this time.
Questions from the board? Trustee Lang?
This is exactly what I was thinking, what we should do as well, and I'm sure a few others have thought that as well. That, you know, we saw a few weeks ago what it takes to be in the park business, and we had some major repairs to do to one of our parks that we probably shouldn't have, that the Park District is someone or an organization that should be doing this. And perfect idea to partner with them somehow, some way to get this done, if that is the will of the board. Thank you.
Anybody down there? Trustee here?
I too agree with that. What about the survey from the Park District? Did they conduct one, and if so, what were the results of that survey?
They did. In 2010, they did their last community needs survey, and it did show up. It did register on the radar of items that were brought up by the public. However, there's been a trend for dog parks within the last 5 years, and the information I'm giving you now, even as a suggestion, and the research that was done, was not done in a bubble. I did reach out to Executive Director Bukes and discuss this a bit with her, and she did inform me that they are going to do another survey in 2015, so next year, where they will be a little more specific about dog parks, and the data that they collect at that time, they think, will be a little more informative as to, okay, how many people just want one versus how many people will use one, and getting a little more into the meat of, okay, if this is a real priority, then let's weigh that against the other priorities, because there were things that came up, such as a skate park. A skate park was actually one of the top priorities from the community needs assessment. So when they do their survey next year, they're going to focus maybe a little bit more on a dog park and really flesh out how many users and what the real demand is in the community.
Okay, because I'd like them to obviously centralize it, and if there really truly is a need for it, just don't put it somewhere in the village where these people won't be coming to it.
Can't get to it, right.
Right, thank you.
Trustee Kruger, anything?
Thank you. I'm thoroughly in favor of the idea of collaborative work between the village and the Park District. I too agree that this is a Park District jurisdiction just by the very nature of what it's called, Dog Park, Park District. So I just think that it goes there. I work very close to a very nice dog park that is handled by the Northwick Park District. And after I investigated what it took to build that, I just felt like right now we're not in that position just yet, certainly not to do it on our own. So I would like to work with the Park District. Thanks.
Trustee Brady, anything?
I too agree that that's Park District, more have to be Park District business. But I'm not in favor of collaborating with the Park District on this. Every bit of 15 years, I have been campaigning to get decent facilities for all our seniors can enjoy life and have exercise and everything else. We've offered them money, we've offered to partner with them, we've offered everything, got nowhere. And I'll be darned if I'm going to partner up for dogs before our seniors have a better place to participate. Forget about it.
Okay. Trustee Hank, anything?
I think the park has done a good job of putting parks in the neighborhoods. And we have some isolated areas, and if you take a little tour of the parks at certain times of the weekend, especially on the weekends, you'll see that the parks are being utilized by the dog walkers. However, there are some isolated areas in the community where we have properties that we might want to talk to the park about. They're small pieces, but they might serve putting a park there just for the fact that it would be easier for the people in that particular neighborhood to use that park. But other than that, I think it should be looked at with the park taking a greater role in this and working with the park so that when you have a dog and you want to use the park, that you don't have to go an extra mile to do that. So it's going to take a little time and a little effort, and I think with a little more planning, we should put a good plan together. The biggest thing that this board should be deciding now, do we want to do that? Do we want to have animal parks to walk the animals? So, I mean, Mark Turtle doesn't care where he goes, so it doesn't make any difference. Thank you.
No. Okay. Trustee Vogel?
I agree, we probably do need a dog park, but again, I think it belongs with the Park District, and I'd hate to get in any type of long-term collaboration with them to agree to long-term share the maintenance and then just, spend our dollars that way. We have plenty of other places where we need to take care of right now. Roads, we just saw what the budget was looking like. This next project that's coming up on the agenda, even special events. We have no money for special events, but yet we're going to go out and spend money on a dog park. I don't think we should. So I think we ought to leave it up to the Park District. It's their expertise, and they seem to have been pretty progressive the last few years on getting things done. So I think we ought to let them take the opportunity to take it and run with it.
Want that consensus? Let's do
Please.
consensus on
And
it.
the consensus would be to send a letter of support to the Park District, but not committing the village to anything other than wanting to be part of the process, and we can define what that means specifically after they do their research and come up with a plan. So the letter wouldn't be committing us to any dollar amount. It would just be saying that the board is interested in working collaboratively.
Thank you. Roll call.
Suggestion,
Trustee Vogel?
Oh, I'm sorry, wait a minute. Trustee Brady.
what about the county? What about the forest reserve? You know, Lake County has dog parks in the forest reserves. You know, we have ideal spot right on Milwaukee Avenue for a nice dog park that's not being used.
That's absolutely an option, and one that I think the Park District would consider when they are locating, or at least scouting for locations. You're right, Dam 1 that is no longer a dam is a perfect location.
The one next to the Weston, we're growing weeds there nicely, you know, being a dump lot more than anything.
Well, I think what we do is offer the support, and if they look at the options of the other taxing bodies, whether it be the Forest Preserve or Cook County or whatever, we're there to help them in whatever capacity we're able to do. You know, everybody has to help each other here, so I think it's a good way. Let's do roll call.
Okay, Trustee Vogel?
Yes.
Trustee Hein?
Yes.
Trustee Brady?
Yes.
Trustee Heer?
Yes.
Trustee Krueger?
Yes.
Trustee Lang?
Yes.
President Juris?
Yes, thank you. Also, I want to piggyback on something here after talking with, I had brought this up a while ago, I believe it was budget time, and my intention was there are many areas within subdivisions of this community, and I'm talking subdivisions like the Hollywood Ridges, the Meadowbrooks, the Dunhursts, the Kingsports of the world, the west, east, whatever. But there are pockets of land that are village-owned that you can never do anything with. And my intention was to have gathering places where people can walk. I mean, if you look in everybody's neighborhood, people walk. Mary Pepinatos is probably the king walker in this community. She walks. And they walk their dogs and they meet friends and they gather. But if we can, what I like to do is give this task to maybe the Plan Commission to work with Andrew Jennings and identifying, to start off, 5 areas within the community that are in subdivisions. Trustee here for many years has always talked about, and I'll never forget it, our outside of our community really looks nice because we've changed images and we've done the pocket parks, but what are we doing internally? And when I used to live on Wilshire over there, I recall, before staff took it over, but I recall just taking the initiative and taking the island at Cedar and Dundee Road and getting rid of the weeds, the gravel, and go spend a few dollars, at that time Kmart, and bought some flowers and some mulch, and I bought sod and made that entranceway of that island into that subdivision in Hollywood Ridge nice, really nice. Then the Plan Commission with the brooms and blooms got more involved, and staff ended up making it one of their little pocket parks where they beautified. This is what I was looking at, because we have areas over there in Hollywood Ridge. A good example is a piece of property that not nice, doesn't look nice, is at Valley Stream, across the street from the Rancheros, at Elmhurst Road. It's a weird triangle piece of property with overgrown shrubs, overgrown trees. You have the creek behind there. We're spending money cutting grass there. We're spending money trimming trees there. And it's an eyesore into a huge subdivision. Why not look at that? And I'm not talking about maybe a couple benches, maybe a couple garbage cans where, you know, neighbors can say, I'll meet you at the corner. It's a walk. My neighborhood is loaded with walkers, every day. So maybe that's a gathering place, you know? So I like to see the Plan Commission identify 5 spots, then work with staff, come back to us, because you and I have talked about this, John, with maybe a dollar amount, something small, just to beautify an area. Help those tired neighborhoods and sprucing them up a little bit. That's something I like to see. I think it's worth the money. I think it's worth the investment. And I think it takes makes people with a lot of pride into their, because you know what? When I did that little thing, it motivated people to say, you know what? That looks nice. Maybe I need to do something for my house. You know what? Reinvesting back into these neighborhoods that have been around for 50, 60 years. I think it's a great idea.
And I think it's something that people can take some pride in. And it's a little project for the Plan Commission to help do, working with staff. So if that's okay with the board, I'd like to see that. And I think it's a good inventory thing to see what possibilities there are in the neighborhoods that are village-owned properties today, that are small, that we can do something small with, to beautify those areas. Trustee
Question?
Kruger?
Thanks. Would that, whatever the outcome is from Andrew and the Plan Commission, would that then come to us as an expanded level sheet?
What we'll do is, while the PC is identifying these 5 areas, we'll come up with a design that makes sense, that we can wrap our head around how much each one would cost, something that we could use in different areas. Say it's going to have, a garbage can, a bench, a bollard lighting, whatever it may be, a design that can be used in multiple areas, and then we'll come back to you. So the answer is yes. So we'll put a dollar figure to a design that can then be attached to whatever list the Plan Commission comes up to, and then the board can prioritize what order they'd like to do these things in based on the amount of money that it costs.
And most likely it'd be next year, because we're going into a new budget year.
Right. Very good. Thank you.
So it would be a gathering place, not a dog park, because people out here listening to us will go, we just talked about dog parks. I just don't want people who live near these vacant spots all of a sudden think tomorrow they're going to have a dog park in that vacant lot.
No, because we haven't identified anything yet.
Right.
And people who walk their dogs would go there to gather, to talk to their neighbors, or just a designation place to go and walk through a neighborhood.
And the dogs would have to be on a leash.
Have to be on a leash. It's an
all the other,
Supply,
of course.
clean up, owner has to clean up.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Perfect.
Any other questions?
No, good idea.
Okay. Next item, discussion, crime-free housing program. Manager Svandelis.
Thank you. Several weeks ago, there was an article about crime-free multi-housing initiative, and the police department and the chief will introduce here in a second a little more detail about what it is. But what's been put together tonight is a bit of an explanation of exactly what crime-free multi-housing, what a crime-free multi-housing ordinance would look like, what the impact would be both from a financial standpoint and what some of the potential gains would be for the community. So I will introduce Chief Benson to talk a little bit about that. Something to consider. This is, there are benefits associated with this. They are long-term benefits. Usually there's a 3 to 5 year return on investment, before you start seeing the positive effects of such an ordinance. And it does come at a cost, though. There are personnel associated with this. And as you'll hear, the Village of Wheeling is already participating in the initiative, but we are doing so on a voluntary basis. This would create an ordinance that makes participation mandatory, and you'll hear the details about what that means. But Chief Benson, if you just introduce it with a little more detail, and then we have a slideshow presentation from our 2 commanders.
Thank you, Manager Svandelis. I'll start with a little bit of background. As you stated, the Wheeling Police Department has been participating in the crime-free multi-housing program since the early 2000s. In the complexes that have voluntarily participated, we have seen a reduction in crime. The crime-free multi-housing program was initially implemented by Commander Wisniewski in the early 2000s, followed by John Tevens, and then by Commander Panagakis. We also have 2 other fully trained, certified crime-free multi-housing officers available to assist with the voluntary program, or if this turned into a mandatory program, we already have some trained people on board. In order to realize the full benefits of the crime-free multi-housing, the board would have to pass an ordinance mandating the crime-free program. Commanders Wisniewski and Panagakis will discuss the logistics of a mandated program. If passed, the goal of the program would to see a reduction of calls for service, both the police department and community development, increase the property values, increase demand for available rental units, and a higher quality of life in the rental communities and the residential property in the neighborhoods that have rental properties. But I will warn you that this isn't an overnight fix. As Manager Svandelis said, typically the return on the investment in a program like this is probably about 4 to 5 years to fully realize it, and the commanders will go into some of the details of why it takes such amount of time. As discussed by Manager Spondilis also, this program would come at a significant cost that will be covered in the short presentation by both commanders. Before they start the presentation, I do want to remind the board that we are still down 6 officers from our designated staff of 68, and this program I think is a great program, but I also want to remind the board that we've had significant cutbacks to some of our units, such as our crime prevention unit, our traffic unit, and our narcotics/investigations unit. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Commanders Wisniewski and Panagakis, and if at any time during or after the presentation you have any questions, please feel free.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Just to go into a little bit more of the history, probably back in 2003, 2004, when this program was handed down from Commander Wisniewski to Commander Tevens to myself, we took all of the information that was brought in and put it together and started to form a program on a voluntary basis. When we first made recommendation for this program, we knew a lot of departments were making it mandatory for anyone who rented and or leased their property to have to go through it. And you'll see in a minute what they would have to go through. But we were directed to at first start it as a voluntary program. So what we did is we reached out to a couple of properties in our town, which we thought would be a little bit easier to get this up and running. One of them was Foxborough VIP Apartments. And we put them through the Phase 1 training, which is an 8-hour training program. Then we put them into our Phase 2 training program, which is crime prevention through environmental design. Sometimes that's where we lose the property owner, because that's actually where you're going to have to start making an investment. Not the investment where you just sat 8 hours and was educated by us, but now you have to go with us, walk your property, we do a security survey, and now you're going to have to spend a little bit of money in bringing this property to compliance. And it's all about safety, not ordinance violations, but making it a safer place to live. Now, once you did the first phase and the second phase, there's a third phase, and that's the social party. That's where we come in and the property, whoever it may be, holds a party, and we issue them their certificate, and you are now a crime-free multi-housing program. We really only have 2 or 3 of those because we lost everybody in Phase 2 where they kind of didn't want to spend the money. We've reached out to a lot under Phase 1, but that was it. So here we are tonight in front of you saying we'd like to take this program further. We would like to take it to where it's mandatory for anybody in our town that rents and or leases to an individual, be it an apartment complex or an individual homeowner who decides to move out of Wheeling and rent this property to anyone. Now, I'm sure you can all imagine some of the calls, multiple calls that we go to a residence is usually not a homeowner, but somebody who's renting 3 times down at that property. And this could possibly control, not possibly, will control our efforts into fighting crime. As we talk about bringing great entertainment and complexes into town, this would be another tool to our arsenal in combating crime. So as you see, some of the issues that we ran into in the middle 2000 was, and we found out, and the complaints were, that some landlords could care less who lived on their property as long as they got a check every month. They could care less what their past was, what their criminal history was, so on and so forth. As long as that individual or those individuals had a check, gave them money, cash, didn't matter what it was, they rented it. It didn't stand well with the other people. Other problems. Once we got those people evicted, they just jumped to another apartment complex and or property and lived there. So we wound up chasing people around our town with no bite behind stuff. They always had some place to go. Compliance with the current crime-free multi-housing is voluntary right now. It is voluntary. We've reached out to as many people as we can to take our program. But that's it. There's nobody else out there that wants to do it unless we make it mandatory. There are other towns around us, which you've heard. When we first started this, Palatine and Schaumburg were 2 of the biggest towns doing this. In fact, in one year, I believe Schaumburg did over 1,500 inspections in 1 year. So they've started to go forward and try to make it mandatory. What we're asking is we would like it mandatory. There we go.
One of the major reasons that we say crime-free multi-housing is the solution is because it assists and it getting rid of the criminal element from rental properties. And we do this through advocating the use of a crime-free lease addendum. Through an ordinance, it would be mandatory for anyone who is owning rental property to go through the training and also use the crime-free lease addendum with all their tenants before they could get their rental license. This addendum allows the landlord to evict a tenant if they participate in certain criminal behavior on the property or off the property. It also holds the tenants accountable for their guests, because the tenants could be evicted if their guests misbehave.
Okay. Like the commander said, when the property owners attend our crime-free multi-housing, they are put through an 8-hour educational program, which include everything from inspections of their property to the type of gangs that could be in the area, to ordinance violations. But one of the most important things, as the commander said, is that crime-free lease addendum. That has so much power behind it that we don't have as enforcement. They can evict quicker than we could even try. One of the ordinances we have is a nuisance abatement, but as it relates to drugs. And for us to do that, we have to deal with Cook County. So there's time involved, and they are much more quicker and streamlined in what they can do as property owners than we can in evicting the criminal element. I'll touch this. Okay, our 8-hour seminar, like we said, it covers crime prevention. It covers crime prevention through environmental design. That's our phase 2. That's where we go on the property, and we start with the outside. We look at bushes, lights, doorways, latches, 3-inch screws, peepholes, 180-degree peepholes. And we cover just about everything. And when we're done with that property owner in phase 2 on you got me laughing. On the security survey, they know exactly what they need to increase the security of that property.
The second requirement is, as I said, is for all rental properties to utilize a crime-free lease addendum for all rental units. No. We gotta go back. Some of the requirements under crime-free multi-housing, as we said, was to attend the training and use the crime-free lease addendum for all rental units. That will be a rental unit, whether it's a single-family home, a 6-flat, or a large complex. The lease addendum prohibits engaging in any criminal activity on or off the premises, use of property for any criminal activity, use of the property for the use, manufacturing, selling of illegal drugs. And then finally, it's any illegal activity, including gang activity, or a breach of the lease that jeopardizes the health, safety, and welfare of the landlord, other tenants, or imminent or actual serious property damage. This holds the landlords and the tenants accountable for their actions. We have a number of landlords who, besides the complexes that are doing crime-free, that use this lease addendum based upon our recommendation and have been using it for years. But it's all voluntary.
Okay, and one of the major things is the enforcement part of it. The property owners, once trained and have the crime-free lease addendum signed, we can hold them liable for their property and bring them in front of our adjudication hearing officer after they're cited. No longer in the Cook County courts, but into our adjudication officer, where we have a little bit more strength and direction of what we can do. So, a rental license. This is where we work closely with community development. First of all, our intel comes from CD. on letting us know how many licenses that are out there. And again, just because we get a number that are out there, I'm sure there are a number that we don't know about that somehow we'll come across. And once we come across, we'll deal with them the same way we deal with these. But what we would do is, to get their rental license, they would have to come into our 8-hour class, our Phase 1 class, and prepare and/or lease addendum ready to go for their property. And then they can go to CD and apply for their license once they show their certificate and their lease addendum to CD. Citations would be issued if they fail to abide by their lease addendums that they have signed. And once that happens, the landlord can evict the leasee or the renter from that property. Again, much more quicker than us taking enforcement actions against them.
The citation process would be that if a landlord was in violation by not having the lease agreement, we'd issue them an ordinance violation. They'd go through the adjudication process here. They could be assessed fines daily to the rental property owner for noncompliance. And those fines can be assessed daily or one time. And they could have their rental license revoked for any failure to evict when it's required.
Okay, and again, the big part of this is the 3 phases. What we're really talking about when it comes to a license is Phase 1, 8 hours of training and a crime-free lease addendum. But to be certified as a crime-free multi-housing program location, we would like them to be in all 3 phases. We lose people through the crime prevention through environmental design. Once it starts to cost a little bit of money to turn the property around is when we lose these people. The more certifications that we have in our town, the better town we will have.
Crime prevention through environmental design is, Commander Panagakis said before, it's the evaluation and inspection of the property. And it's all for the safety of the residents there. They talk about the landscaping, whether it allows for people to hide in the bushes. The lighting, is there adequate lighting in the parking lots, by the front doors? Security features for door access, door locks, deadbolts. But doing this all with the landlord, we can only make the recommendations. We can't force them to make these improvements with the ordinance. We make the recommendations for the overall safety. And because there's a cost, a lot of times the landlords will not follow through with all the recommendations.
Again, we talk, we have Foxborough VIP Hunt Club. Foxborough was one of our first ones we went to. And when we worked with the property manager, they went through Phase 1 training. Phase 2 training was unbelievable. They're a certified program. And once this was up and running, you could see that we had a reduction in our calls for service by 30% of our trips to Foxborough were reduced by 30%, allowing us to focus our enforcement actions and patrol in other areas. What it did is required criminal background checks on all applicants prior to moving in. So a streamlined policy prior to and then monitoring after the individuals are in and on the property. And they've implemented aggressive eviction and non-renewal policies with their tenants. Again, much more quicker than we could ever go through with Cook County. Again, no offense to Cook County, they just have much more power than we do as property owners.
And the benefits are proven. This is a nationwide program, and every place that it's been enacted, it's been successful. They see a reduction in the police calls for service. They see a safer community, increased property values, increased demand for the rental units. The landlords have lower maintenance and repair costs, and they have happier long-term tenants. A lot of absentee landlords are not out looking and inspecting their property. Once they have a tenant who will give them a monthly check, they're not concerned, as long as that money's coming every month. This program holds the landlord more accountable to be active in their management of the property.
Okay, and with this slide, I kind of wish we would have went before, Michael, but we are after him. But we will still cover it. Now again, these numbers are above and beyond our current crime prevention officer and what she is doing in her collateral duties. You'll see a lot of towns, when they went to crime-free multi-housing and took it seriously, had to add on to their personnel. What we're requesting to fund this, based on the numbers that we received, there's a great chance that we could have over 4,000 licensees out there. And if you take a look at an 8-hour class of 20 landlords in it, it could almost take 235 days, full days, just to get them through this program, which realistically, if we did 2 to 3 times a week, could almost take 2 years from beginning to end to get everybody through. And then it's an ongoing process as people move in and move out. So it's continually going. There's no way right now with our manpower reduction that we're at and the personnel and running the way we are, could we do this program with what we have right now. But we're looking at possibly 1 full-time officer, 1 part-time civilian, 20 hours a week. And again, getting this up and running is only a part of it. Then there's the monitoring of the properties and the incidents and being able to get the information to the property managers of possible issues or incidents that happen on their property from the weekend, during the day, whatever it may be. Our program startup costs could roughly, I mean, we took it at the low end of 10,000, but could it be 20,000? And again, if you think of 4,000 licenses and all these landlords, there's a lot of material that needs to be handed out and a lot of instruction that we would have to do. So with that, are there any questions?
Actually, can I add to that before we move on? Thank you, first of all, and now you've heard a lot of information this evening, so don't be too overwhelmed, because this isn't your only opportunity to ask questions and to hear details on this. But now that you know a little bit of what it is, the question before you is, would you like to see staff really get down to the dollars of what it will cost in order to do this, with the goal of providing you an expanded level sheet that you can then prioritize as you see fit when it comes to the budget. And as President Argyris said, you know, we're coming up on October when we do our budget hearings, and as Chief Benson reminded us, that there are a lot of priorities coming from not only his department but others as well, as we look towards getting out of the recession that we've been suffering through and had to deal with personnel cuts. This is a decision that you're going to have to make as far as prioritization of bringing personnel back on. And it's a great opportunity, because you have an opportunity to really analyze what jobs those people will be doing as they come back on. But this particular program, we saw the one slide that had a person and a half in the police department. Please also know that we expect that there would also be a request as part of this initiative that there would be a person and a half required in CD. I believe Commander Panagakis talked about how the police department works hand in hand with community development department, and therefore the same burden, if you will, the same workload that the police department would receive from this ordinance, the community development department would also have a responsibility and a workload that would require them to spend probably a similar amount of time in order to maintain the program. So the question before you is, would you like staff to sit down and really put the program together and put a dollar figure to it, so that you can then decide when we go into the 2015 budget talks whether this is something you'd like to commit to?
Thank you. Trustee Lang?
Thank you. Well, before I answer that, a couple questions. Could this be funded through fees or licensing to the landlords? Is that something that we can put a price tag on these?
Rental licenses currently are charged a fee, and then it would be the fines. We don't currently charge landlords for the crime-free.
No, not that portion, but the personnel, for instance. Could we raise our fees, if there are fees attached to this, and use that funding or that money to fund this project?
Trustee Lang, I think the answer to that question is, on top of the fees that they're already paying, they're going to have a substantial additional fees in the background checks that they're going to have to pay for. It could get quite expensive if we're going to add another fee on top of that.
And I realize that, but it also might deter then excess rental property, which we seem to have.
The answer to that question is yes. We could do that as a part of the ordinance, and we will see a small portion of the cost associated with the program offset by the fines for violations. So, yeah, yes, you could. You could charge additional fees if you wanted to.
Okay, that's a thought. And then to, you know, I would agree to make it mandatory, but I'd abbreviate the program, if you could, to perhaps 4 hours for single-family landlords. It seems a lot.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we can't reduce the amount of time because we're teaching a program which was taught to us. And if we diminish any of the program and reduce the component of it,
You're defeating the purpose.
yeah, it's, the certification may be altered.
And you're losing in phase 2 the costs. I thought I saw a slide. It was lighting, locks, landscaping, so on. That's the majority of those costs in that phase 2.
Absolutely. And this is my personal opinion from doing many of them. Individuals who really care for their property take care of their property, and this was never a problem. Individuals who do not want to take the extra step to make that property better just backed away from us. There's going to be a cost. You know, let's just take a look at a door jamb. They recommend that you put 3-inch screws in your door jamb on both sides to reinforce it. Not much money involved in that. The security holes, the peepholes, you know, they recommend 180-degree ones. So for a bigger property, it could be more costlier. For a 3-flat or a single family, could be real simple to do. So, but that's sometimes how we lose them is through phase 2 training.
Okay. So just a final thought is, again, adding some fees to this might deter the excess amount of rental units that we do have in this village for single family.
Well, I think you got to weigh in the cost savings too on making these calls. I mean, you saw an example there with Foxmore, 30% less calls to that end since they became certified. So, you know, there's kind of a check and balance there as well, and I think staff would come back with some more solid numbers. But I think the ultimate goal is if we're not going there 10 times a week, and we're only going there 3 times a week, there's cost savings there, and we're using personnel where it's needed elsewhere.
And I get that. That's in multifamily, yes. I guess I'm concentrating more on
the single family. I understand.
And so single family, probably, how is single family a problem throughout the village with crime? I mean, single family rental.
It varies. It all depends on the tenants. And some of the single family could be rental and we don't know it. When we find out, when we keep going to an address because there's a lot of problems and it's repeat, we check with CD in their rental database to find out if it's a rental. And if we can determine that it's a rental, we contact the landlord already. And that's where we get them to use the crime-free lease addendum, or they'll take some action, or they ignore us. I mean, we can't force them. The only ones that we can force are those that are Section 8, and if we call Section 8.
Well, again, with single family, that might be a way to deter excessive rentals, rental property of single family homes throughout the village.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Trustee Vogel?
Piggybacking on what Trustee Lang said, there was a statement made in here that there's like 3,000, approximately 3,000, estimated 3,000 unlicensed rental units out of 4,700.
Well, we're assuming that there's, based on the numbers that we receive, that there could be, if we need to bring people in, between 3,000 and 4,000 licensees.
Okay, well, it said 3,000 unlicensed rental units out of 4,700. What I'm getting at is, if we can get those other 3,000 units, and I don't know how you do it, licensed, I mean, that's a lot of fees that are coming in that we don't have now.
Oh, absolutely.
To cover. But how do you do that? I mean, how do you know that your neighbor is renting? I mean, there's privacy rules. You can't go out and do that. So how do we, I mean, we're going after the 1,700, if that's correct, licensed units who are kind of in compliance right now, but the other 3,000 that are not in compliance and aren't licensed, we have no way of getting to them. And I don't know how you do that, again, with privacy.
Well, if we were to enact this ordinance, we'd have to do a lot of education. water bills, cable channel, internet, we'd have to do a lot of publicity about it and showing the requirements for the ordinance. Then if it's any rental property, it's got to be licensed, it's got to be crime-free. And we might gather some inquiry through there.
Is there any way to compare the real estate tax database to our water bill database by address and find out if there's different names on the bills?
I think there's several ways, and I think it would be labor intensive, which would be another reason we would, both CD and the PD would need additional manpower in order to do this. But again, a short answer is yes, but the truth of the matter is that would be labor intensive, but over time, I think we can certainly we'll never come up with every single rental unit. Yeah. You could be somebody renting it to their own kids or family members and all the bills stay in the same name. But I certainly think if we had the manpower and time, that there are resources out there where we certainly could identify a lot higher percentage of the rental units that are in existence now.
Would we give them once we did this mandatory and passed the ordinance, would we give them a year to come into with compliance? And if they don't, I don't know what the fee is. The rental fee is now, is it per year? A license?
I'm not sure what it is, but like with any new ordinance or state law, we typically have a grace period, and that grace period includes an educational campaign so people understand what our rules are and how to come in compliance with it. And the goal isn't to trick people. The goal is to get people to come in compliance with the rules that are in place and to make sure that they're following the leasing laws and the crime-free multi-housing requirements if passed as mandatory.
I guess what I'm saying is if you give them a year to come in with compliance and we're charging $50 for a license and they don't, would we look at charging them $500 if they're caught?
Attorney Froelich could probably correct me if I'm wrong on this. I think that we would have a fine structure of something like $100 to $750, and that would be determined by the adjudication hearing officer that we already have, the program we already have in place.
We do currently have that fine structure. That's the general fines set forth in the code. Right now, we have a license ordinance we changed a few years back. I don't know if you remember. We used to require annual renewals, and then we went to a program of we granted 3-year licenses, 2-year licenses, and 1-year licenses based on condition of property. So we're going to have to change that. What we did was if our community development department went out to a property that was a rental property and they inspected it for a rental license, and if it came back without any violations, that qualified for a 3-year license. And the reason we did that then was it was less labor intensive. We didn't have the manpower to keep inspecting year after year. If it came back with 1 violation, it was a 2-year license. If there were multiple maintenance violations, it became a 1-year license. I think with this, we're probably going to have to go back to an annual inspection program, which is why CD is going to need more people. But beyond that, what Bill said is our general fine structure goes from $50 to $750 per violation per day. And if we had a landlord that was renting without a license, we could cite him and seek fines within that range.
Okay.
On a daily basis even, so it's there already.
I'm just looking at a way to fund this because I agree this is important, especially with what's going to be happening in the next couple of years. We're going to have more units coming in. And I'd rather clean up what we got because these are going to be new and get these guys to buy into it right away up front, and it'll be a big help.
And Trustee Vogel, to answer part of your question, if we give them 1 year to come in compliance with Phase 1 and a crime-free lease addendum, the only problem we may run into, which we're going to have to look at, which we know other departments ran into, is not everybody's going to run out and get it right away. And they're going to wait towards the end of the year, and then we may not be able to handle all those people coming in for that training. So we'll have to set up some type of schedule for them to come in. But and again, what I offer every trustee is I would have no problem letting you sit through our first 8-hour crime-free multi-housing Phase 1 as a board, so you can see exactly what the landlords are going to go through. If you want, 2 at a time, 1 at a time, all of you at a time, I have no problem for you to sit through that. And on that one, we could probably reduce the time a little bit, skip the breaks, no lunch, and get you out a little earlier.
What? I'll take the abbreviated version.
Thank you.
Trustee Hein?
Thank you. We have to start someplace, but the key is going to be putting together a program. We're not going to have to do any follow-up. If you start giving people 1 year to go into compliance and so on and forth, that means you're going to have to go back and check to make sure that they're in compliance, so you're making the call twice. I think that we're going to be really surprised to see how many family homes, detached, that are rentals now, okay? When you take one subdivision alone, Dunhurst, with over 500 homes, in comparison to how many are rented and so on and so forth, this is a tremendous task. Right now, the people that are renting, okay, on a single-family home, they are inspected every year, or they're put into a 1, 2, 3 program, depending on how they operate. Anybody that owns an apartment complex, okay, they spot check them. They don't do all 300 or 400 apartments, take like VIP, okay? So right now, they're paying a fee for inspections to the Community Development Department for safety factors. Doors swinging the right way, all kinds of different things. Now we're going to put another cost on them for doing the inspection. And then we're going to have, when they do an initial lease-up, we're going to have another fee for them because we want to make sure that they're leasing to good people. It's very complex. It's not that simple, okay? It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time. But I think the benefits are there to do this, because what's going to happen is we're being inundated now in our social services department with Sherry and her people. We're working with you on going back for calls and such, and the state of Illinois dropping all the things that they were doing and putting it into local enforcement. Maybe we can take some of that stuff and see that depletion there too by doing this. That initial cost of $158,000 or whatever it is, okay, is a drop in a bucket. It really is. The question is, put together a plan that's going to work from the get-go and make sure that everybody is on the same page. If you're going to take the program that you have here and you say that the compliance, you got 2 years to come in compliances, or you're going to do this step, and this step, it's like going to get a health license in town or liquor license in town. They don't say you have to have your license and you have to go to school, okay, for health and so on and so forth. You have to do it now. And if they're going to be in business, and that's what it is, renting out any unit, I don't care what it is a business. Okay, and if they're going to be in that business, they should change it. They should be charged for it.
Thank you, Trustee. Trustee Brady?
Thank you. I think it's important we do this. I'm not so sure about the methods or the combinations of partners or people that are involved in it. I don't know if 2 people from one department or 1.5 persons from one department partnered up with a person and a half from another department, if it's going to be a full-time assignment and they're going to be working together all the time, one searching, one following up, or is this going to be, well, when we get time, we'll send this person out? Because, will be a full-time job, believe me. There's so many rental units out there, like Mr. Hines said, in the single-family neighborhoods, there are rentals all over the place. How do you dig them out? Except you go through files, you sit, and you search, and you search. So I'd like to know a little bit more on how this could be laid out where these people have a definite job, and that is their job, not that they work for the police department and they'll do their police duties first and do this, or work for community development. They'll be out doing other inspections, and then when they get time, they'll work on this.
If the board agrees to this tonight and we move forward, we will absolutely have all of that information provided for you for discussion at budget time with numbers specifically associated with those job requirements. And we can talk about how many hours it'll take and whether it's a full-time job and whether there will be shared resources. We'll have all of that fleshed out for you if you tell us to go ahead tonight. that's what you're giving us permission to do.
Now, if we find a homeowner that is renting his house and has not filed for a permit to do so, does he get fined?
He should be cited.
We can cite him and bring him in front of our adjudication hearing officer until they come within compliance.
Okay, we better put better notifications out for that to happen, because there's a lot of people that couldn't sell their house, and the alternative was to rent it while they had to move out for another job, and they might not even be in state here. I think that you're going to have to have a campaign so that these people aren't being burdened, being fined unnecessarily, and have to come back to face our committee. But one other thing, and I don't know, if you say that when a landowner or an owner has a potential tenant, he sends the information to the police department, and you review this tenant as to his qualifications as far as...
No, what they would do is, if an individual wants to rent out their house, they would obviously have a contract and have the individual fill out a crime-free lease addendum, and it's on the owner landlord to ensure that the individual he's renting to is in compliance with the crime-free lease addendum. That's on them, not on us.
So if a couple guys want to rent an apartment and they're maybe convicted felons or under indictment for a felony, how does the landlord supposed to know this unless these guys sit and tell them,
Well, what they would do is when they fill out the crime-free lease addendum, and that addendum is sent out to whatever company who's doing the background checks, then that would come in. But again, like you said, it has to be reported. If it's not reported, the landlord's not going to know, and we obviously wouldn't know if those are the people. But when we do these, they have to show 2 forms of ID with the landlord. Again, we go back to Foxborough, and we go back to VIP with Mr. Manda and his staff, which was another great property to work with. They go through all those requirements, and once that individual signs, they have that information saying the individual turned over the proper ID. The information that was run comes back to the individual turning the ID, and the criteria was met. And the criteria is on the crime-free lease addendum.
So landlords have an agency that they can get
Absolutely.
a background check.
Absolutely. And then as the phase 1 8-hour, a portion of that is in the phase 1. And as we go back to notification, like Commander Wisniewski talked about, I think one of the greatest things we do as a department is, prior to any type of enforcement action, we educate, announce that we're going to do it, and then we come and do it. And one of the reasons we do that is for the educational component, but also when we do walk into the Cook County court system and we let them know, look, we gave this individual every opportunity to come into compliance. They chose not to. And of course, here we are today.
Yeah.
So.
I'd be all for this. I just want to make sure that there's enough advertisement that this is our program, and not that somebody's, blindsided by this in any way.
Sure. Like the village manager said, if voted on, we will have a plan of action for you, along with the job description of the individuals that would be involved in this program.
If in fact this person rents to a party and finds out after they're in there and they paid everything that, and they've been living there for a while, that there is in fact a problem with this person that might be dangerous, hazardous, somebody that's got a certain condition that if they don't take their medicine, they'll, flip out and start hurting people and all kinds of stuff. Can they actually have them evicted?
For medical reasons, no. But if they're committing criminal behavior, and it's after they have signed the crime-free lease addendum, then they can evict them if it's a violation. I have a sample of the crime-free lease addendum, if you'd like a copy of it and see what it says.
Can I add to that? Trustee Brady, it's really this program's more about crimes occurring after, as the commander said, after the lease is signed. In other words, let's say a landlord leases to a convicted felon. That's not necessarily a violation of this program. Right. You might have someone who served their time and is back on the straight and narrow, and that's fine to lease to that person. But if you look at an example is the Mount Prospect ordinance, they have a system where they declare properties as what they call chronic nuisance properties. To become a chronic nuisance property, for single family, I think it's 3 crimes within a year. For multifamily, it's 6 crimes within that building within 1 year. And there's a long list of crimes going anywhere from homicide to drug use to prostitution to various things. And that's when you're declared chronic nuisance, that's when as a landlord, you're brought in for a hearing where you can get your rental license revoked. So in other words, I think what you're getting at is if you find out you've leased to a convicted felon, that doesn't mean anything. That might be he might be a perfect tenant, and you wouldn't have to bother that person. It's if the crimes keep occurring.
Well, yeah, my point was, if we're the ones making that call as to the legitimacy of a renter, I'd say no, because it's too easy to cross that line. But if somebody else is making the call as to the background of an individual or a group or a family or whatever it is, that's fine. We're off the hook with that. If a family has a son that is a bad boy, just, habitually, he moves in with them. What happens to the parents when this kid causes all this trouble in
That could be an issue. It could be an issue. I mean, this program is meant to apply to not only a mother and a father in that situation, but family members, guests that live there. It just extends onward. But it's really, again, more about, if you can think about it, more about what occurs after the lease is signed. Not so much what that person did in their life before. But as a landlord, you have a right to do a background check, and you don't, you can decide not to rent to whoever you want based on credit, based on all kinds of situations. But our program's more about crimes occurring after a leasehold interest starts.
We could do that with some of these associations we have in these condo associations where, a group, even if they're maybe a little bit less than top-notch condos, people in there are decent people, but you get one bad family moves in and the whole place is a crime-ridden neighborhood all of a sudden,
In that lease addendum, what that does is, if crimes occur, that landlord then has a tool to evict that particular tenant.
That's the good part.
That's the key to this program.
All right, good, thank you.
Trustee Kruger?
I agree with what many of my colleagues have already said. I guess if I had a question, it would be in Mark Janik's memo in the packet. It said in 2014 there are 945 single-family townhome and condominium units licensed for rental. That tells me that that's easy data to get a hold of, and like Trustee Brady was saying, that there would have to be good communication and advertising about getting to those people about, making sure that they're using the lease addendum. Am I right there?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
So
I think there are some homeowners associations right now
That
that require it as part of their bylaws.
Oh, great.
That if they rent the property, they have to have the crime-free lease addendum.
Great.
At least one in town that has it.
That's great, because you'd be surprised that I was surprised even walking my dog through Horizon Trails. Very, big homes, but they do, I think one of the homes was owned by a company that used it for relocation services. Now, is that considered rental? Would the company, certainly vet the employee to make sure that they weren't a convicted felon kind of thing? But, there might be some unique rental situations going on out there in single-family homes. I just wanted to make sure it was easy enough for our community development people and the police department to know what they're dealing with. So I'm thoroughly in favor of exploring this for 2015 budget. Thank you.
Trustee Hare?
Thank you. Chief Benson, I know you said that you were down on 6 officers. I hate to put you on the spot here, but if you had to choose officer versus this position, which one would you go for?
Well, the proposal is for this position, the full-time, to be an officer, but if your question is specifically, would my first choice be this officer go to supplement where we're down, or for this program, I'm 100% behind this program. I think it's a great program. I think it's proven itself across the nation as being a positive one in reducing crime and increasing the quality of life issues in communities. But again, I don't want to keep harping on this. You guys, as you well know, for the last 5 years, I've been trying to get our manpower up, at least slowly. But in addition to the 6 that we're down physically, right now, recently at any given time, I can tell you we're down 2 on long-term duty-related injuries. I've got 1 in the academy, and I've got 3 retirements that are coming in the very near future. So if you add those 6 on top of the 6 I'm already down, that's about 18% of my sworn force, which is tough just to get through, and the amount of overtime we're going through has been significant. So I don't want to say that I don't want to see this program come. I think this program would be great. It would be absolutely a benefit to the community. I think it's an investment with a long-term positive return. But if you're going to ask me my immediate needs for the department, I'm going to say, you know, the units I told you that have been short-staffed are units that are key to this, my department and to the community, and our ability to address crime issues and traffic issues and crime prevention issues. So it's a tough one. I would love to see this program go. I completely support it, but it's been difficult with the manpower situation we've been in later. And I know that probably doesn't answer your question directly, but that's what I'm looking at.
Well, it does, because having worked in the crime prevention unit, I know how important this is, and you couldn't have said it better. One question I do have for you, though, couldn't we civilianize the position at a lesser cost?
We've talked about this at the staff level, and we looked at what most people do around us that have been successful, and most of them are sworn. And the answer to that is yes, but our opinion, the expert's opinion in roundtable on this, is that if it were a civilian, I think that would create a large burden on our sworn staff, in that we know when there's going to need to be intervention because of violations. We're talking about people engaging themselves in criminal activity, and as we do now, we're certainly not going to allow CD or any civilian to go out if there's a potential for violence or having to confront somebody involved in criminal activity. So I think that it may be cheaper as a startup to have a civilian, but I think in the long run, it's going to tax my department with our sworn members a lot more than it would benefit from just having a sworn member be that point of contact when we have to have the intervention through a violation of this type of program. That's my opinion. Again, could it be done with a civilian? We know there's a couple municipalities out there that do it. We don't know what, you know, their involvement. Is it a civilian that oversees it, and do they have an officer or multiple officers assigned to the unit to do this intervention, and what are their collateral duties? That I don't know, but running as lean as we are, I think that it would be a better investment rather than every time either CD or the civilian that was hired for the village, whether it's in the police department or community development or wherever. I think that the amount of intervention that's going to be required, that would require a sworn officer, is going to be significantly high, and I think it would be in the best interest to run this program based on our circumstances with a sworn officer heading it up, supported by the civilian staff the part-time that we would need, and whatever additions to community development and the civilian staff that they have now. That's my opinion.
And I appreciate that. I'm trying to help you out here, because obviously the cost factor is going to be one of those that come to play during the budget. Community development's already out there checking rental apartments, and there's no uniformed officer that follows them along. I believe personally, if indeed there were an issue with a tenant, you would think whoever it was, maybe like a CSO position or whatever, they would come back to whoever the supervisor was and say, I have an issue with this one, I would like to have a uniform officer accompany me to this home to write this citation. I mean, there's ways around it, but I'm just trying to be cost effective in regards to, but I understand the situation. I support the program 110%. I think it's 14 years. It's in development since it obviously was here, they said since the early 2000s, but I think this should have come a long time ago. But yeah, I'm supporting the program. I'm just trying to look at different ways that we can maybe work around that.
Between now and the budget hearings, we will come up with any options that are available to us.
Thank you.
And discuss again as we talk about the 2015 budget.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Heine, you had something else?
I just have a quick question. In the chart you gave us on the crime-free mobile housing, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different communities from Edison down to Wheeling. And you have a whole mess of other communities that have evidently, they're on the
Bill,
program.
talking to the mic, would you, please?
They're on the program, but they haven't instituted anything. I see there's two communities from Lake County, and you've got DeKalb, and the rest of them are all Cook County. Is this primarily a Cook County program, or is this a state program, or?
It's a national program. It started in 1992 in Mesa and has spread to over 2,000 communities internationally. These are just the ones
I don't see Buffalo Grove on your Arlington Heights.
they actually may not be part of it.
I'm sorry?
They may not be part of it.
Okay. Okay. Is that because they have their own housing authority?
There's nothing mandating a department to run this program. It's something that's departments choose to get involved in.
It's just for my own.
No, it's a completely voluntary program.
I understand. But it's a national program.
Trustee Hein, it is a national program, and when you take a look, even though they don't have a program that's up and running, doesn't mean that those towns didn't have individuals who went through the training. Unfortunately, what happens is when you come through the training and you sit down and you see what a beast it could be, some people just opt out and say, let's not do it. We'll handle it by a case-by-case basis, and all of a sudden it gets out of control on you. And then you're in front of the board trying to get a program put together. It's another tool to the arsenal of law enforcement if done properly.
I'm 110% for this program or any type of program like this, because I think it's going to solve a lot of problems that we have in other departments and enforcing the law. And I think that's very important. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to piggyback on that, I agree. I think this ordinance gives you something with teeth. And I think that's a big help. I think we owe it to this community, especially with single-family homes that are out there, that we don't know that they're being rented. And we know, all of us on this board continually get phone calls constantly about this neighbor, that neighbor, all these cars in the driveway, 15 people living in this house, there is no landlord, he's out there somewhere. And you know what? Unless we make those calls or the public makes those calls to either CD or the police department or any one of us, and it happens constantly with me, I think this really gives you teeth. And right now, you had mentioned Foxborough, VIP, they do this program strictly on a volunteer basis.
Yes. And then we have Hunt Club, we have apartments on North Wolf Road, we have several.
What I like to see, Attorney Ferrillo, since you're resting now, the last couple of weeks, if we can do something with an existing ordinance on new construction multifamily apartments that are being proposed ongoing now, i.e. Riva, i.e. Urban R2, Philhaven, that we have this program in place where it's mandatory as part of their licensing agreement that they have to be, not a volunteer, have to go through this program. We have the staff doing it now with a few of the volunteers that are doing it. But until we come to the budget time, I don't want to wait till budget time. Any new multifamily apartment rental units in this community that's being constructed is mandatory. They have to be part of this program. So
What about existing? Yeah, well, what about existing?
Existing, we're going to have to go back at budget time to try to do something with that. But if we can find some, take the time. I'm just throwing this out at you. But we have 3 multifamily apartment rental units coming in proposed in this community.
Sure.
There is no thinking about our volunteer. You are part of this program.
Okay.
Moving forward. Bob, go ahead.
One last question. Thank you very much for putting this together. I know this is labor intensive. You did a very nice job, both of you. One of the questions I do have, because as you guys know, being in the profession that you're in, the public wants to see almost instant results. And then when you say 3 to 5 years, everybody will sit around going, what's happening with this? Because there's people watching us tonight going to go, yeah, get this program, and I want them to hit the road running on this. So based on what I just said, is there any way of closing it up or coming back on an annual basis to tell people, this is the success rate? So we can keep the public informed on how well this program is working for our community.
I'm sure we can develop a way to monitor our progress. We'll have to do that with how many we've trained, how many. The lease addendum can only be added to an existing tenant at a renewal. You cannot do it midterm.
Right.
So there is that transition, is renewing leases. So there would be,
Well, it's labor intensive. I mean, trying to keep on top of this, I know I've done it, but the fact is, it's a good program, and I just want it to be successful.
And a perfect example would be, we use Foxborough, we could use VIP, we could use Hunt Club. When you take a look at Foxborough and you do a yearly statistical look at it, they reduce by 30%. So a year later, 2 years later, we could go to Part 1, Part 2 crimes, see if they reduced in that area. At some places, could be instant based on we talk about the crime being happening once the lease was signed. But if the property owners do it the proper way, they can weed out individuals coming onto the property before the crime even occurs down the line.
You know well as I do, the public
Absolutely.
is results.
Oh, absolutely.
Oriented. They want to see it. They don't want to wait 5 years for somebody next door to be moved out, or whatever the story may be. Anyway, thank you.
Mr. President, might I request that we get to see this before budget time, so this doesn't become a soccer ball, kicking it back and forth then. I'd like to at least see what the end result would be, and there's a criteria that you brought up. When it comes budget time, we can zip through it.
We'll certainly keep the board up to date as we get through. I mean, we don't have a lot of time, but I think what we're talking about at this point, beyond the request that President Argyris made of Attorney Ferrolo, is really a bottom line number. So once we have that, we can share that with the board so that it's not a surprise.
I do have one more question, sorry. This goes to the attorney. Let's say someone goes to the adjudication hearing and he wants to appeal what they said. How long is that process?
Appeal the adjudication's ruling?
Yes, let's say they assess a fine to him, let's say $200. He says, well, I'm not paying it.
They have 35 days to file an appeal. That appeal can take up to a year to 2 years.
So then we're tying that person that could still be in that house for another 2 years while this thing is being fought out in the court, in an actual courtroom.
Your question has a couple parts to it. Are you talking about a landlord losing his rental license?
All of it.
Here, two different questions. Landlord could lose his rental license. As far as someone getting evicted, that's a different court. That's not going to come here.
Right.
That's going to go in the Circuit Court of Cook County.
And
that's a forcible entry and detainer action. That's an action where, there'll be an eviction. Right. And that occurs relatively quickly, far more quickly than a straight appeal.
So if I say to my landlord, I'm not moving out, same thing if I don't want to pay my rent, go ahead and go to court and try to throw me out. That could be years.
No, an eviction can get done within probably 8 months or so.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's a notice, the 5-day notice, that, you're probably familiar with all of that. And ultimately, an eviction process is a summary process. It occurs over one court hearing. But I would say 8 to 10 months if someone drags it out.
All right, thanks.
Okay. So the consensus do you have something else, Trustee Brink? So the consensus with everybody, we want to see something going and
Yes.
get something from Attorney Ferrolo regarding the new projects in town. Why don't you guys stand up there real quick, official communication. We got a couple of events coming up this weekend. Maybe the four of you can piggyback on that. This Sunday being Rocking with the Cops, if you want to tell the public about that. Where, what time, when?
7
Let me help you. Sure. This Sunday, 7:30 to 10 at the Aquatic Center.
Right. This is actually a great time of the year because this Sunday night, what we will have Rock with the Cops, another program that we put together and been very successful. We will have the swimming pool from roughly 7:15 to about 10 o'clock, where we'll have swimming, we will have food, we'll have, I believe it's trustees again, barbecuing.
That's right.
Some good food. And we will have a DJ, we will have our canine doing demonstrations, and nothing but fun. I know that I think I have 25 to 30 of my freshman football players from Wheeling High School attending. So, we're definitely going to utilize all the free food.
Hear that, Dave? Yes.
And on Tuesday night, again, we have National Night Out, where we will go and visit the communities, the Arlington clubs, Lexington, Tahoe, Sand Pebble, Center Street.
Old Town.
I didn't want to say that.
Did you just volunteer?
No,
No, it is Old Town.
No, I know that, but you're in for this year?
Yes, we're in for it this year.
I thought maybe that was a little pressure. That was good.
Again, when we will come out, us and the fire department and a couple of sponsors will hit the community. We'll have officers, command staff, trustees in all these different locations rotating around. Again, two great nights. So hopefully everybody can come out and come to our Rock with the Cops, and then we'll come out to you and see you in the community. So, and again, I just want to thank you for tonight, allowing us to come in front of you. I'd like to thank the chief and the deputy chief for allowing us to put this program together. But real quick, there's not too many times that we come in front of you with a program that we don't support, or we don't feel is going to work, or we would never come in front of you. And I think you go a couple weeks ago, we're always looking to what's best for this village and the people of it. And this is another tool for us to be able to use. Again, we wouldn't be coming in front of you tonight if we didn't think this would work. We wouldn't waste your time, we wouldn't waste our time. It's another tool. We know exactly where you guys sit, and the community comes first, and you've been so supportive of all our programs, and I just want to thank you.
And just to say something, Officer Swanson, she was gracious on giving me some information because I had inquired about it, and she was very well versed with it. So extend our thanks to her as well, because I know she believes in this program as well.
Again, a perfect example is our crime prevention officer. She has many collateral duties, and then taxing her with these could jeopardize some of our programs. Sure. So we're just looking to the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. On a quick note, happy birthday, Trustee Hare.
Oh,
look good for 65.
Thank you. Oh, man.
Touche. I'm going to go to Manager Svandilis on a quick update that he wanted to share with everybody.
Thank you. I'm happy to announce we talked a lot about budgets and we talked a lot about money. It's good to talk about money coming into the community as well as just a good effort, good public effort for getting our name out there a little bit more, and that is to say that starting this Wednesday, SWANK, the Solid Waste Agency of Northern Cook County, will have their first day of operations in their new home located on the second floor of our Public Works facility. That also means that the construction project has concluded, or I should say will conclude probably very late tomorrow night in anticipation of Wednesday's first day for our SWANK friends. The project went very well. There are a couple of change orders, minimal, that will be coming to you once we have a project closeout. But all in all, the project was on time and on budget, and I think very successful. And I know that the director and the assistant director from SWANK are very happy. We've worked closely with them, and they were very pleased with the process. It was certainly a partnership between us and them, and I think will be a very successful partnership throughout the years. So this is good news for us, and both from a financial standpoint and from a cooperative standpoint.
Thank you. Trustee Hein, anything?
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Trustee Brady?
One question. Where are we at on crosswalks?
We have a study that was just completed, and maybe I'll hand this over to Andrew, who can give a little more detail than I can.
Sure, we have a study that was just completed.
I love being right.
The consultants that we've been working with, the results of their counts are in. They gave us a couple of different options on a draft report. We, as a staff, went through their draft report. It makes sense to us. They did find reason to believe that we would be successful in showing a case that we met the warrants for a crosswalk, a mid-block crosswalk, outside of a signalized intersection. What we're doing now is packaging that up to present to you, hopefully August.
It should be the August workshop, correct?
That's the idea right now. And then after that, we would take the board direction and go to the next step, which would be working with IDOT on the actual design and permitting.
Thank you. Okay. Trustee Lang?
Thanks. Yesterday, there was a disturbing story in the Herald about a large number of homeless families attending our Wheeling schools. And it was wondering if we can look into the situation a little bit. It's disturbing in the fact that there weren't many details as to where these families actually are. Do we have problems with
homeless children?
Do we have problems with people living in cars or?
Well, I reached out to Manager Svandilis and Director Weezer, and I know John has been playing phone tag today with the administrator, the director over at District 21, and Sherry's done some investigation and getting back to, I believe, with John in the next day or two with some findings. And they have been reaching out. I think there's more to that story.
Well, that's what I'm getting at.
Talked about that.
That's what I'm getting at. You know,
and it is disturbing.
It's a very sad situation, but there were no details.
Want to say anything else besides that?
Basically, that's what I was going to say. I would only add that I think this might be an example of a headline and a story that maybe didn't give the full picture, and there is a lot more to it. So what we'll do is we'll put something together in response for all of you to see, so we could talk about it in public and tell the other side of the story.
Well, as it looks at right now, it's a shame that they painted Wheeling in such a bad light, because there does seem to be more to it than what the story reported.
And maybe even to get ahead of it a little bit, Sherry, please correct me if I'm wrong, that some of this is about the definition of the word homeless, and the way that doesn't necessarily mean that people are living on the street or that they're living in their cars.
It's the first thought, though.
Right. And the example that we can use is, and Sherry's probably going to have to pick this up for me, is Fox Point. Because there's a transition that's happening there, that technically they are considered homeless, even though they are still in their home.
Yes, I believe some of this has to do with the definition. Considering if you are sharing housing, you may have had your own housing, you are now sharing with another family, that would be considered homeless as well. And so I'm not aware of people living in their cars, many families living in their cars in this town. I believe this is more of a definition. Not that these families don't need assistance and that shouldn't be a part of this program, but I think it has more to do with a little deeper explanation on what these families are facing.
And not necessarily that they live here in Wheeling. They could be from another town going to a Wheeling school as well.
Correct.
Big time. I mean, Wheeling High School and the elementary schools in Wheeling are fostered by other communities, not just the people in Wheeling.
Correct.
So they're going to do their homework.
Well, thank you. That answers my question.
Just about all District 21 schools in Wheeling, are on the list of the tops in the state. How did that happen? Don't they check any place else?
Well, that's why they were reaching out, and hopefully we'll get a report.
I wonder, I know other communities, I don't know how legally it is that they screen these applications to go to these schools, even though they're public schools, and, they have to live in the community that they're going to school, so that they're not putting the burden on the taxpayer. I'm wondering if District 21 does this, or they just let anybody in.
I'm sure they do that. They all do that. I mean, that's a requirement. I mean, we represent quite a few school districts, and every district I've ever worked with does require proof of address within the district.
Something's going to be going on.
Thank you. Trustee Lang, yes?
And just one more thing to remind everyone to register for the August 30th the runway at Chicago Executive Airport. You could register at, there's a link on Chicago Executive website. It's shyexec.com.
And the date on that again
is August 30th, this
August
Saturday.
30th? Okay.
Labor Day weekend.
Gotcha.
There is also a link on our homepage.
Correct. And Pelwaukee.org, which I mentioned last week, so it's everywhere.
Okay. Good. Trustee Vogel, anything?
Nothing, thank you.
Trustee Kruger?
Not for me, thanks.
Trustee Hare?
Nothing, thank you.
Clerk Simpson?
Okay, I have an announcement to make. The Wheeling Garden Club will host a flower show at the library this coming Saturday, August 2nd from noon to 5, and Sunday, August 3rd from noon to 4. They will feature annuals, perennials, bulbs, tubers, as well as fruits and vegetables, miniature and small designs, and fairy gardens. and they would like people to come and see it. This is their first annual flower show
Thank you.
at the library.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Andrews Fondilis, anything else?
Nothing else, thank you.
Just a couple things real quick. Maybe in the report at the end of the week, John, along with your staff, an update on the stormwater study.
It's already ready.
Good.
Yep.
Okay, good. So we'll get some. It's been a while. And I just wanted to share with the board, I was asked by the president of the Northwest Municipal Conference to actually serve on 2 boards. I will chair the Transportation Committee Board, and I've been asked to be on the executive board of the Northwest Municipal Conference. So I'll keep you guys updated on things that are important, that represent all our communities, and I'm happy to be asked. So I think that's a good thing.
Future president.
So with that, there is no executive session this evening. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by trustee Hare, second by trustee Kruger. Roll call, please.
Trustee Vogel?
Nah, we're having too much fun.
Trustee Heidi?
Yes.
Trustee Brady?
Yes.
Trustee Here?
Yes.
Trustee Kruger?
Yes.
Trustee Lang?
Yes.
President Harris?
Yes. See you next week. Thank you.